What if I told you the dark secret of Ed Gein's House of Horrors? And what if I told you that some of his twisted crimes inspired some of the most iconic horror movies of all time? This is the true story of Ed Gein, the butcher of Plainfield. We know that Ed Gein was born in 1906, somewhere in Wisconsin, where he lived his entire life with his abusive and religious mother, Augusta. She taught him that women were vessels of sin and the world was full of evil. She isolated him from society and made him completely dependent on her. When she died in 1945, Ed developed a morbid fascination with death and corpses. He started to visit local cemeteries at night and would dig up bodies of women that resembled his mother. He brought them home to use their body parts to create various items such as lampshades, belts, even a chair. He also made an entire skin suit that he wore to pretend to be his mother. But grave robbing wasn't enough for Gein. He wanted fresh victims. He killed two local women, Bernice Warden and Mary Hogan, and he mutilated their bodies in his House of Horrors. He was finally caught in 1957. Ed Gein was digging up graves for about 5 years, from 1947 to 1952. He said he returned some bodies to their graves after experiencing remorse, but police didn't bother to check the cemetery to see how many bodies he dug up or if he ever returned any. Ed Gein was diagnosed with schizophrenia and found guilty by reason of insanity. Ed Gein's home was burned down in a mysterious fire in March of 1958, just before it was set to be auctioned off. Today, the site where Ed Gein's house once stood is an empty, overgrown lot. The police collected and cataloged all the various evidence, including the human remains that they found in Gein's house. Some of the evidence was destroyed by a fire that broke out in the courthouse in 1958. The rest of the evidence was eventually buried in an undisclosed location in 1984. The police did not return any of the remains to the victims of the families or the cemeteries that Gein had robbed. Gein spent the rest of his life in a psychiatric institution where he died in 1984. Ed Gein was buried in the Plainfield Cemetery where he dug up and robbed the graves of several women who resembled his mother. His unmarked grave is located just between his brother and his mother, just behind the grave of Eleanor Adams, one of his victims. Eleanor Adams was one of the women whose graves were robbed by Ed Gein. She died in 1951 and was buried in the Plainfield Cemetery, where Gein dug up her body and used her skin and bones to make some of his crazy items. Her grave remains empty to this day. His crimes influenced many writers and filmmakers, such as Alfred Hitchcock, who based Psycho on Gein's story. But Psycho wasn't the only movie inspired by Gein. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Silence of the Lambs, and many others were inspired by Gein's legacy.